Welcome to MGN podcast, and this is me, Yi Meandr. I'm digital health expert and specialist in technical products and community leader of MGN. And this is a series of our podcast for mental health and neuroscience professionals around mental health area, especially focused on technologies, business, and medicine. And today we will have very interesting topics. I know this topic may sound for some of the professionals a bit controversial, but the point is that whatever your prior experience is about this topic, try to be more open today and just think about it from the science perspective and from the usability perspective and from the safety reasons. And the today topic is psychedelics and mental health, where science ends and risk begins. So today I invited Vlad Andreev, and he is certified psychedelic-assisted coach, public mental health educator, executive coach, and entrepreneur. Hello, Vlad.
Hi, honored to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
And to start from, please tell a little bit about your background related to science and related to medicine and the topic of psychedelics for us just to understand where your experience come from.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Because I can talk a lot about this topic that is dear to my heart. Yeah, I would need your assistance in, managing the conversation flow here. I was born at the intersection between Europe and Asia in a region called Urals, and then I spent most of my professional career in the corporate world, working at different companies in commercial positions. I used to work for British negotiation consultancy and help people to negotiate commercial deals and, well, basically help them improve their bottom line. I burned out at some point in time because the corporate world is this machine that, well, has no place for creativity or, well, being yourself, especially if you're a person who decides to expand your own consciousness. Being a person who consumes psychedelics is quite isolating, especially if you're living in an environment and a society where it is stigmatized and it's hard to connect with others. But then, roughly in 2021, I became an entrepreneur and became a co-owner of a strategic marketing consultancy, and that gave me a lot of freedom. And then I started to dive deeper into what was interesting for me. And there are two elements that are important to know about me. One is that I've been consuming psychedelics for 23 years of my life. So I have a really, really vast experience with altered states of consciousness. And I quite early discovered the healing properties of these powerful substances. And I was able to self heal some traumatic events from my past. And the second aspect that's important to understand is that I have a quite rare autoimmune disease, which is called ankylosing spondylitis, which is a very rare variation of arthritis that is affecting connective tissue. And roughly 19 years ago, when it manifested for the first time, I was half paralyzed and couldn't really walk. And then I went into remission slowly with pharmaceuticals. And then I changed a lot about my lifestyle. I started to learn more about human physiology, biology, neuroscience. Slowly, step by step, I've implemented a lot of health related changes in my life and went into remission to a point where I no longer needed pharmaceuticals to suppress my immunity. So 2 years ago, I stopped taking any pharmaceutical drugs to maintain my condition. And then I realized that I no longer need them. But then roughly around that time, I started to dig deeper into the science around the healing properties of psychedelics, and I prefer to call them entheogens. And if we have the time, I'll explain why. But from now on, I'll refer to them as entheogens. I realized that actually there's this phenomena that is happening called, well, psychedelic renaissance, or I prefer to call it entheogenic renaissance. And about 2 years ago, I started to share whatever findings that I could get my hands on about any type of scientific research of the healing properties of these powerful substances to address issues like post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, substance use disorder, anorexia, and other mental and physical health issues for that matter, like chronic pain, migraines, cluster headaches, etc. And then I started to basically channel information through the platforms that I've created on Telegram for Russian speaking audience, on YouTube, on LinkedIn as well. I have a blog called Entheogenic Renaissance where I share the findings. And then I decided to get it educated on that topic. So I went through open programs by University of California, Berkeley, which is called Psychedelics and the Mind. I went through another training by Psychedelic, which is called Embark. It is designed for therapists that are conducting psychedelic-assisted trials. And then the third education that I went through, which was by far the most experiential and beautiful and enriching in terms of connection with the broader psychedelic society or entheogenic society, which is called, entheogenic assisted training, coaching, sorry. And that was a combination of online and offline learning designed to implement the medicine, as I and the colleagues in my community prefer to refer to entheogens, in coaching practice. And the reason that that specific tool is used is that entheogens create so-called the window of neuroplasticity that helps people implement changes more rapidly, such as building new habits or changing their routine or maybe rebuilding their identity. And this is where it all merges, because when I acquired sufficient amount of information about neuroscience, I also built a framework that is designed to help people build a strong foundation for mental health. And that product is called SAPIENS, which is a framework of the 10 pillars of mental health, how I call them. And those are sleep, nutrition, movement, stress management, social connections, light and dark, sense of agency, purpose, rest, and finally, curiosity. And those are behavioral interventions that don't require any substances whatsoever, but then combined with the power of entheogens, they can help people not only become better versions of themselves, but they can help executives to, well, maintain high level of performance, clear out their debris of the past trauma, and, well, be the role models for a healthy living. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I'm now sharing the knowledge that I've acquired over the past years with the wider audiences. And on actually one other thing worth mentioning about the controversy of the topic. Yesterday, I was at the event hosted by University of Barcelona, where the entire day was dedicated to latest scientific evidence, clearly demonstrating that substances like DMT, psilocybin, 5-MeO-DMT, and ibogaine have healing properties and can be used with precautionary measures to help people heal from various types of mental health issues. And next week, I'm going to be the first in history person that would be representing Russian speaking community of psychonauts at a global psychedelic week. So yeah, that's definitely an honor and privilege to be the one sharing that information about the wider society.
Thank you so much for your intro about yourself and your experience and coming a little bit deeper on the topic. We can imagine that although our main target audience are mental health professionals, not many people really understand what psychedelics are and what do psychedelics actually do in the brain. So if you can talk about it, I know that maybe this is very wide topic, but in general, how do you define and psychedelics? Maybe how do you differentiate it, for example, from, I don't know, classical medical herbal therapy, which is usually widely expressed right now. So what is the difference? What are the psychedelics and what are their kind of influence on the brain? If you can do a bit some intro on this topic for those who just, never so much heard this term.
Sure. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a tough question because it requires to condense a lot of information within a short answer, but I'll try to do my best. So entheogens are a group of substances that have specific properties of the way they affect on human body and brain. In a nutshell, in terms of psychological aspect, we all have our conscious and unconscious mind. And what psychedelics do, they basically dissolve the border between conscious and unconscious. There are two metaphors that I use to describe that type of effect. The one is the dam that holds, the water that is basically gradually dripping it to the conscious level. Whatever is sits in the unconscious is held by the dam. So when psychedelics, or entheogens rather, enter our system, the whole dam basically disappear completely, and we're flooded with the information that's been sitting in our unconscious. The other metaphor that I like is called the Marian Trench, and this is the deepest place on Earth, out there in the ocean. If I remember correctly, it's roughly 8 kilometers deep. So when we are in our regular daily life, we are on a semi-conscious level. We are above the water level, right? So we see, we observe, whatever. And then sometimes in our dreams, we go deeper, we dive in, but then we get back and we're in a conscious state. And then when entheogens enter our system, we go really deep inside and we get to interact with the really deep levels of our unconscious mind, or psyche rather, where we can interact with traumatic events from the past, maybe some physical violence, maybe some sexual violence, unfortunately, maybe some other aspects that were traumatic and they were suppressed or sitting there. And when people get to interact with those types of memories, they can change not only the internal narrative and the perception of those events, they can relieve those events and heal. So, depending on the type of the substance we're talking about, and the entheogens can be divided into several subgroups. There are so-called classic entheogens that are mostly like plant-based. And just a quick remark here, 80% of all pharmaceutical drugs on Earth are made out of plants. So entheogens that are plant-based are DMT, which is an active component in a brew called ayahuasca, which doesn't have a standard formula. It has a lot of variations. Psilocybin is an ingredient, or rather, psilocin is an active ingredient, so-called magic mushrooms. That there's a species of mushrooms that has 200 varieties, give or take. They have the psychoactive ingredient in them, and that ingredient is called psilocybin. And then it dissipates in our gut, it becomes psilocin, and it enters our brain through serotonin 5-HT2A receptors. There are other elements like salvinorin A, or maybe in terms of the plant-based, those are like the main ones. But then there's another group which consists of MDMA, widely known as the love drug or party drug. Ketamine also is considered as an entheogen as well. And there are other more severe entheogens, such as ibogaine, that requires a lot of preparation in terms of screening. And for people who are dealing with issues with heart, it is a contraindication to ever take ibogaine because it is quite toxic for the heart muscle. However, it is extremely efficient at addressing issues like opioid use disorder, because in a strange way, ibogaine basically reboots the entire system and a person doesn't have any craving for the opioid any longer. So depending on the substance, the effect lasts between 15 minutes to 48 hours, which is ibogaine, and for 15 minutes would be DMT, or 5-MeO-DMT, which is a secretion from a frog that lives in certain areas of either United States or Mexico. So in a nutshell, entheogens have been used by humans for millennia, and there is scientific archaeological evidence clearly demonstrating that ayahuasca, for instance, have been consumed by indigenous cultures of Southern America for 8,000 years. Other substances like psilocybin, mushrooms, or the other plant medicine, as it's called in the community, been used in other locations on Earth as well, such as Indian Soma, for instance, that mentioned in all the ancient Rig Veda texts, and other locations like Kikion as a brew that was used in the Eleusinian Mysteries in roughly 3,000 years ago in Greece, where the founders of modern democracy like Plato, Marcus Aurelius, and others participated in those ceremonies by altering their own state and then probably integrating this in life. So entheogens are very different from any other substance because they create hallucinogenic effects. And before they were called psychedelics, which is translated as mind manifesting, they were also called hallucinogens. They were also called psychotomimetics because they mimic psychosis in a sense. And the person who is under the influence of a high dose of an entheogen can be seen as a person who is experiencing either schizophrenia or bipolar. And this is a very important element that I want to state it out, that there is a big, serious contraindication if a person has predisposition for schizophrenia or bipolar disease, or if a person has parents that have this type of disease, that entheogenic experience can act as a trigger to launch such disease. But on the other hand, I've participated in webinars where people with bipolar disease who went through a clinical trial with the help of entheogenic assisted therapy were able to basically heal. So that's very strange properties of the substances. So that's like in a nutshell. But there's another thing that I want to point out here is that entheogens open critical periods or windows of neuroplasticity, and our brain more or less is like stable and set in terms of the vast amount of neural networks that are fixed by the age of 25, and then it's quite hard to implement new changes in life, whatever they are. But with the assistance of entheogens, there is this state that is like an afterglow, so to speak, during which a person is somewhat malleable, but at the same time, with the help of a certified, qualified professional like a therapist, a coach, whomever that is, it is possible to rewire the neural networks on a physical level and psychological as well. So that's probably the biggest advantage of the use of entheogens in therapy and for personal self-development. And if you compare with all existing pharmaceutical substances, they are by far safest and they do not require constant use, which is brilliant if you compare it with antidepressants that can lead to an internal bleeding.
Thank you so much. Yes, and we just recommend everyone, if you are not sure about trying psychedelics, you can always consult your doctor to be sure if you are if you are able to do that, yes, in the safe way, and stick to highly recognized, yes, certified professionals in this field to be more secure. But talking about this topic that you just brought up about the type of diseases, which were already clinical trials around how to use psychedelics to work on them, can you tell about it more? What are the top mental health issues which are proven strong evidence of psychedelic therapy, like, I don't know, depression or PTSD or anything more? Can you give, I don't know, top three main issues that are already using in the scientifically medical base, and where, if you know,
Sure.
which country?
Yeah, thanks. One other thing that I wanted to add on top of what you said about the consulting with the health professional on that topic, it's quite tricky because none of the clinical professionals can actually recommend take entheogens for one particular reason. They are on a Schedule 1 control list of substances, which means that if a person would recommend, they would probably risk their license. So if somebody wants to get more information, they should look for official sources such as MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Research, Open Foundation, which is a Netherlands-based NGO, or maybe other organizations like ICEERS, Chakruna, etc. Look for vetted information and yeah, invest in self-development and learning by yourself because again, yeah, it's hard to get really professional advice. But going back to your question in terms of the issues that are being addressed with the assistance of entheogens, the most widely confirmed
Hello, are you here?
that can be used. And if we're talking about American experience, for example, then we can refer to the phase 3 trials run by MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, that clearly demonstrated the efficacy of the use of MDMA to treat PTSD. And efficacy was as high as 70% of the people who went through the trial went into remission. And the strong thing about MDMA when it comes to treating PTSD is that it affects the level of amygdala, which is connected with the PTSD on many levels, especially the emotional loop that people keep on going through and feeling over and over and over again, and pain that is associated with it. So MDMA helps people break that loop and well, fill the system with self-love, self-compassion, relive, let go, forgive, forgo, etc. But there's one other caveat that's important to understand is that there's a protocol that is specifically designed to help people heal with the assistance of entheogens. And there is recreational consumption of entheogens that happens on itself by, whenever people go to clubs or whatever. And those protocols are completely different. So recreational protocol is about seeing the external world, interacting with it, dancing, maybe if we're talking about clubs, raves, or whatever. Therapeutic protocol is very different. It requires a lot of preparation with a therapist or coach that is designed to not only build trust, but also to dig into the issue on itself. Then it is the experience itself, the entheogenic journey. And then the third part, which is by far the most crucial, it's called integration. So you need to bring all those insights from that entheogenic journey back into your life, integrate it, and, well, reshape your identity, maybe, or internal beliefs, or build new habits, or whatever. So MDMA is extremely good at addressing PTSD. But psilocybin is actually also showing a lot of promise. And I know people from the Ukrainian Association of Psychedelic Research who are working with the veterans from Ukraine in Spain with psilocybin. And they are actually quite good at helping people deal with PTSD. So there's a real life evidence clearly demonstrating its efficacy. The second most widely recognized direction to use entheogens is treating depression. And depression is a very complex phenomenon. It may be connected with metabolic biology or some other issues that are related with inflammation within the body that could lead to that condition. But depression on itself could be more of an existential crisis, so to speak. It could be fear of death, or it could be something more severe and difficult to process or deal with. So again, entheogens help people identify the source cause of that, these or that particular issue in terms of mental health, and then reshape the internal narrative, change own perception towards it, and heal from the wounds that happened either when we were born or throughout our life that we received, and heal our bodies as well along the journey. The third direction is the substance use disorder, and this is really, really big one, especially if we're talking about the epidemic around OxyContin use or opioid crisis, however you call it. So entheogens, and here when we were talking about, again, ketamine, psilocybin, ibogaine, MDMA, not so much, but DMT as well is quite powerful on that front. So they show a lot of promise, but also there's plenty of scientific evidence. So just to give you an example, back in the Soviet Union in 80s and the early 90s in Leningrad in St. Petersburg, Professor Dr. Krupitsky used to apply ketamine to treat people with alcohol use disorder, and they treated roughly 10 or 11,000 people quite effectively. Their method was a bit invasive, and the current existing methodology is slightly different. It's more non-invasive, but nevertheless, the efficacy is there. People went into remission, and in the long run. So I'd say those are three major ones, but of course, migraines, headaches, and yeah, other issues as well, like chronic pain is also something that can be addressed with the assistance of entheogens because they also act as anti-inflammatory substances.
Yes, thank you so much. Um, To continue on, how do psychedelics affect emotions? How do they affect memory and stress regulation? Because due to many of the things, as you said, related to activity of neurons, yes, and stimulation of them. And same time, if we talk about it more, because mental health memory is very important, yes, and the perception of stress. So can you talk about this more in the way of, like, for example, maybe about hormones, something? Let's maybe as an example, maybe take one of the popular treatment options that maybe you're more familiar with, and you can like talk about it deeply from like as an example.
Okay, so in terms of managing stress, right? And okay,
Managing
so
stress and how it affects memory. Hmm.
right. So there are two directions, and let's divide them intentionally here. So when it comes to the application of entheogens, whether recreationally or in the therapeutic environment, their use shows that people become more resilient. They're dealing with stress better and easier, and that is mainly due to the transpersonal type of experience that people go through. So one of the things when it comes to a high dose journey with entheogens is that people get to experience this phenomena called ego death. And ego death is, well, it sounds scary, but it can be scary when you experience it for the first time, especially if you don't know what it is, if nobody told you what's it going to be like, you feel like you're dying. But if you're doing this in a controlled environment, I mean, it's safe. Nobody died because of use of psilocybin or DMT. Those are extremely safe. But people can do stupid shit under the influence of entheogens. So it's important to have a sitter for the first experience. So going back to the resilience and the experience of the ego death and the oceanic boundlessness, whenever people have this type of experience, they recognize that whatever issues, whatever problems they have in their life, they're so meaningless in the context of the scale of the universe. So when they go back to their regular life, they are somewhat equipped better to deal with stressful situations. Their nervous system becomes more resilient, and they are able to deal with whatever comes at them with, this philosophic approach of, comes and goes, it passes. It's like, those lectures from Ram Dass, they give you a better idea of how it can be felt. So there's resilience that is definitely associated with it. But then in terms of, that's stress, right? And what was the second? Hormones, right? You mentioned. I think
Well, I was talking about how does it affect memory and stress
memory.
regulations in this yes, in the case of maybe specific
Good.
example.
Good, thanks. So, in terms of memory, there is an interesting element to it. If again we're talking about depression or PTSD, the entheogens help to reconnect with the deep-buried memories of the past that were either traumatic and then led to the creation of that condition on itself. And then once those re-emerge, you can then reshape the narrative and relive those events so that they don't any longer burden you in your daily life. In terms of the effects of long-term effects on memory, the research indicates that there are no negative consequences. So it doesn't mean that people who consume entheogens on a regular basis, they somehow lose, quality of their memory or they become more forgetful. Nothing like this. I wouldn't say that they are enhancing memory, but during the window of neuroplasticity, people become more sponge-like in terms of absorbing new information. So when it comes to learning new habits, new skills, new language for that matter, or acquiring new information, that becomes somewhat easier when a person does that in a somewhat condensed or intense manner while the window of neuroplasticity is open. And depending on the substance used, the window of neuroplasticity can extend between roughly 3 days up to 1 month in a case of ibogaine. So when that happens, people can indeed absorb more information and ingrain it into the neural networks because of the neurogenesis, technically. So, yeah, I'd say if used properly, they can help improve the knowledge base of our brains and bodies.
Thank you. And talking a little bit from the other perspective, is there any like psychological risks for that? If we talk specifically for psychological well-being of a person, and which type of risk can it be? On which stage? Can you talk more a bit on the risk
Yeah,
part?
Yeah, there are risks associated, and it's important to understand that psychedelic entheogens are not for all. And yeah, there are two vulnerable groups that I mentioned before: people who are predisposed to psychosis, schizophrenia, or bipolar disease. It's not necessarily that the experience on itself would become triggering, but it may be, especially if the environment is hostile. So how entheogens work on our mind and body. Technically speaking, they are catalysts. They are non-specific amplifiers, as Stanislav Grof called them, which means that they are not changing our worldview per se. Rather, they're acting as catalysts of whatever is happening in our internal mind. So, if a person is consuming a mind altering substance in a non safe environment and is not taking care of the concepts like set and setting, popularized back in the day by Timothy Leary, a person can, in fact, get traumatized. And the research shows that roughly 6% of people who consumed entheogens deal with issues like HPPD. I don't remember what it stands for. Per, damn, let me Google. I don't remember like what it stands for. So basically, it's a consequence of use of entheogens, but it happens hallucinogenic persisting perception disorder. Yeah, that's the one. So that happens when people consume entheogens in not safe environment, in hostile environment, or they don't know what exactly they are consuming, and they are going through this ego death or whatever the intense experience. And people sometimes refer to them as bad trips, but bad trips, they don't exist. What exists, in fact, is a difficult trip. And what people need to understand whenever they're dealing with a mind altering substance like entheogens is that they are technically dealing with their internal world, their own demons, their own fears, their own pains, their own traumas, their own memories. Whatever is happening in the mind of a person is just their internal world. And some people are just not equipped to handle that intensity, and that can lead to consequences. So, if a person that never consumed a substance like this is offered by somebody to do it in a place where they are not feeling safe, where they're not sure about the company of the people that they're with, it's better to avoid it and just not do it for the sake of
Um,
one's health. But
Here, just to have a bit question, you mentioned this kind of a set and setting, or how do you call it from the Stanislav Grof? you just already a few times mentioned this kind of concept of that there is kind of a correct setting and incorrect setting for the experience. Maybe if you can shortly just tell some key rules, what is should be, what should not be, and related to this certain setting and maybe your personal vision as well.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the question. So the set and setting is a concept that basically outlines how an entheogenic experience should be conducted. And depending on those two key elements, a person can go through either a healing journey or a very, a diabolical experience. There was this beautiful phrase to fathom hell or go angelic or soar angelic, just take a pinch of psychedelic. That phrase was well, coined, if I remember, by not Aldous Huxley, but by the Humphrey Osmond. Yeah, it's the British psychiatrist. So, set and setting. Set is more about the emotional state of a person that goes into the entheogenic experience. So, for example, if yesterday or within the past week I had something really emotionally difficult, like a death of a friend, a relative, I don't know, somebody got into a car crash from, my closest circle. Maybe I or somebody lost a job and it affected me, or some traumatic or emotionally charged event happened. It is better to avoid going into entheogenic experience. A perfect set is to prepare properly, sleep well, fast or diet properly so that there is no ultra processed food because it affects the mood, avoid sugar, etc. Be mentally prepared for whatever comes, to surrender to the experience. And this is the key one. There's this beautiful phrase, if you meet a monster in your entheogenic journey, just embrace it, let it eat you, and ask that monster what is he or she doing there or it doing there. So that's set in a very small phrase. Setting is a composition of the environment in which a person is located. It is a combination of factors like basically place, sound, music. Music can be a medicine as well, and then it's used in entheogenic assisted therapy. Place, whether or not it's hot or cold, whether or not you need to go somewhere, and a person who is under the influence of a high dose of entheogen won't be able to move far. So you need to make sure that for the entire journey, you are safe in this environment. There is no, I don't know, war action happening nearby, or some loud noises, or your neighbors are demolishing their apartment, or the neighbor's dog barking. Basically, ideally to do it somewhere close to nature or in a remote place where there's no external noises. Avoid use of electronics, notifications, and any obstructions, or not obstructions, but distractions, so that you don't get any deliveries. You don't need to do anything throughout the entire day during which the entheogenic journey unfolds, and ideally for the next day so that you can land properly and recover. So if you think about the set and setting, you want to make sure that you're in an uplifted spirit, so to speak, and you're going through this intentionally and build intention, of course. But then you need to make sure that the environment in which you are going to be in for the duration of the entire journey is friendly, trustworthy, and comfortable. Take a lot of pillows, take a mask, put it on your eyes, because it's the best when it comes to the healing properties and the healing protocol. Take a blanket, put on a nice healing music playlist. There are plenty of them out there, and yeah, just make sure that it is extremely comfortable. So yeah, that's a nutshell.
As I understand, there is this kind of different ways of using the psychedelics, because before it was part of a traditional medicine, and now kind of modern medicine also try to grasp it, but to be more concrete, to be more safe, yes, and they built this kind of hygienic protocols, hygienic that be more like secure and so on. But my question for you will be, as I know, as you also explore not only the health perspective, but also you did explore the philosophical and cultural perspective. So due to self-development process, I would ask like that. Did this kind of frameworks miss something that I don't know how our ancestors use this for healing and development of brain and of body, or it was something like quite similar. If you can compare a bit the methods and especially highlighting in your personal opinion what is kind of risky and what is not risky, to going back to our overall topic of this podcast.
Wow, such a powerful question. So there are a few elements to it. The first would be the way that it is used right now in the medical model and is completely different from the one that is used in the indigenous cultures, where you got a shaman, you got the supporting environment, you got the community. Community is the medicine. Food is totally different, of course. And if you're talking from a holistic perspective, so to speak, the way it is used to this day in the indigenous cultures is completely different from the westernized or rather northern medical model that is used right now, because medical model is more sterile in a sense, and then you go into a nice environment, supposedly you go through the experience, of course you get preparation, and then you get the integration, which is important, but then again you live your life in a probably urban place somewhere where there are a lot of other elements that are affecting you, like I don't know, news or traffic jams or other things. And in indigenous cultures, you have a totally different thing. You don't need integration per se because you are living in sync with community. You're eating natural foods, which is not ultra processed, and it's not affecting your mind, body, or whatever. You don't have all the evils, so to speak, of the technology and the environment that are causing the stress for the body itself. But there are other elements that are important to recognize and understand, because of the stigma, because of the prohibition cultivated by, frankly speaking, and you can look it up, xenophobic and racist politics by Richard Nixon's administration, who managed to push through the prohibition through entire UN back in 1970 without any scientific evidence of the harms of entheogens. Because of this stigma, the entire community is not regulated, which means that there are all sorts of healers that are providing their services. And because there are no guardrails, you can't really distinguish like if this person is safe to deal with or not. And unfortunately, about 7 to 8% of women that go through various types of retreats with ayahuasca or other type of medicine get to experience sexual abuse. And that means that if you are going to a retreat or a ceremony or practice with an underground practitioner, you need to make sure that that person is safe to deal with. I have this phrase that I keep on using is be sure about the person to whom you are entrusting the keys to your psyche. We must not forget that entheogens were used by Richard Manson to brainwash his disciples. He used a lot of LSD to basically, shape them in a certain perspective. But what I'm saying here is that it is critical to vet the practitioner in terms of presence or absence of knowledge about just understanding of the ways how entheogens work. First aid in case it's necessary, ways on how to deal with difficult trips or journeys, screening by default. Like if a person is taking medications, depending on the interaction, it could be potentially lethal, like MAO inhibitors with ayahuasca can lead to death, or opioids combination with ibogaine can lead to death. So those elements need to be checked by the person who is running the retreat or journey or healing, whatever. So the human element is the most dangerous, surprisingly enough. The substance on itself is not dangerous, but if a person is going through this journey by themselves and then they get this feeling, a revelation that, oh, I need to heal others, but they never went to therapy, I mean, it's a red flag. It's just so wild. It's like completely wild, wild west out there. So on one hand, you want to regulate it in a way, But on the other hand, the more you regulate, the higher the costs. And the model of like Switzerland or Australia or US for that matter clearly demonstrates that when you make the entire procedure 100% legal and in line with all the taxes paid and supply chain control, the price skyrockets and it becomes inaccessible for the vast majority of people. That's why underground healers are popping up like mushrooms after rain. So again, human element is critical, and community as well. Whenever you go through an experience like this, one thing that is critical is to connect with people with whom you can just share, just talk it through, so that they won't judge you, so that they won't tell you, oh, you shouldn't be doing this. And I cannot stress this enough, but the ability to accept people for who they are and what they are is so critical. I sometimes meet, healthcare professionals, psychiatrists, so-called. They have a diploma, but then a client comes to them who tried psychedelics or entheogens, and they're like, "Oh, but why are you doing this? You shouldn't be doing this." And then you're like, "But yeah, but why? I mean, who told you? I mean, is it bad? I mean, there is no scientific evidence, but then you've been indoctrinated." So again, humans, community, and yeah, I think those are the main aspects. And yeah, well, education or lack of knowledge, rather, the ability to learn for yourself and get vetted information that is, well, scientifically backed. That's critical to have access to this type of information.
Yeah, I will agree with you, and I will tell more. And of course, we should always remember, even as a Western society, as a European society, that mental health is really new type of science and neuroscience as well. And using psychedelics in mental health, psychedelics and neuroscience is even more new. So to really talk about say 100% safe strategies, we need to understand that it all takes time, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't work. Like if we don't have the already made licensed framework with the all the contradictions or recommendations for every type of diseases, it does mean that it can't work for this disease. So we can say that during to the level of science right now, using the psychedelics is part of experimental science, even though it was long time practiced, but due to medical science-based framework and medical framework, a lot of things are still ongoing and in process. And every 5 years, every 3 years, even sometimes even 1 year, you can hear new articles, new inventions about this, and even some clinical trials ends and new data exists. So if you're really interested in like going deeper into this topic, welcome. Due to we need to understand that anyway, the history shows that it was important instrument in the society of humanity, which we should at least explore. Yeah. Maybe some of the effects of them are a bit mythological and how to say optimistic, but some of them sure working. So how to define it, how to be less risky, more risky, how to go deeper into some, I don't know, natural healing tradition or go deeper into science validation of this tradition. This is up to choice of every therapist, how he used instruments. We can't provide a clear guideline. It's like right now for every person, but for sure you can try to dig deeper, understand more, and decide for yourself. Just please be aware that you need to be very careful if you provide this type of services, and try to be more responsible and more, I would say, focused to get the higher results, which is also important. Last questions before we will finish our podcast is maybe just to kind of wrap it up, imagine you talk with our community, mental health professionals and neuroscientists. Some of the people got interested into trying maybe of usage psychedelics in their mental health therapy with their clients. Can you give any advices what they should start from, maybe highlighting specific resources to read about, or maybe specific licensing that you will recommend to make
Yeah.
some advices, instruction for newcomers in mental health and psychedelics?
Sure. So, first and foremost, self-education is the key here. I mentioned some resources, but let me reiterate, and I'll stress out one of them that is really a big one. The conference ICPR 2026 is held by Open Foundation, which is a Netherlands-based NGO that is probably by far the most widely recognized and has the widest reach in terms of the number of entheogenic community professionals, doctors, MDs, etc. So that conference is scheduled for June 2026, is 6th or 8th, if I remember correctly. Typically runs for 3 to 4 days in Haarlem. That is a good place to see for yourself and meet with other professionals, listen to the latest scientific evidence, cutting edge research, etc., etc. Then you got Mind Foundation in Germany, you got ICEERS in Spain, you got MAPS in the United States, Chakruna, which is good. Psychedelics Today is pretty good source of information as well. But then when it comes to actual experience, if a person decides to go for it, there are certain jurisdictions where substances are decriminalized, such as Portugal. Portugal, roughly 20 years ago, decriminalized all substances, so whatever it is decriminalized possession or consumption, not sale or purchase, of course, because that would be a legalization aspect. Although in Netherlands, for instance, it is quite legal to go and buy psilocybin containing truffles, but the content of the psilocybin in the truffles is different from the mushrooms, and you need to understand what is the proportion because you may need more truffles to get that type of experience. That's why a lot of retreats done by my fellow colleagues in the community are done either in Netherlands because, well, it's technically legal, or in jurisdictions like Jamaica, where you can go to a pharmacy and buy a chocolate with psilocybin mushrooms, which is amazing and mind blowing. Or people go to Peru to go for an ayahuasca ceremony where it's legal, or other jurisdictions like Costa Rica where it's kind of gray. Psychedelics Alpha is a good source where you can search for the legal status of various types of substances. Other than that, search for certified professionals who know what they're talking about, and of course, they've been trained in modalities. In the certification can come from various types of organizations, like the one that I went through, Psychedelic Coaching Institute, or MAPS, or other. Oh, there is another program that is actually recently started by Open Foundation, which is called ADEPT, and that program is really, really nice and thought through. And on the board of that program, or among the tutors, there are brilliant minds like Elena Eicher, who is a Swiss-based therapist who, among other professionals, published guidelines for psychedelic-assisted therapy in Switzerland, and she is teaching basically how to conduct the therapy itself. So that is probably the most reputable source of training when it comes to European Union. There is another training that is happening in Germany by Mind Foundation. Their approach is slightly different, probably as in German as well. But in Europe, it's probably that's it. The rest would be done from either US or Canada, maybe Australia, but less so. The other frameworks are more theoretical, like Exeter University on transpersonal psychology, and doesn't require practical use or approach. But overall, I'd say, yeah, go for vetted information, self-educate, make sure that it is scientific based. And to this day, there are thousands of scientific publications. And in my blog, Entheogenic Renaissance, I've compiled roughly 700 papers, which I went through. Well, not all of them one by one. I used AI to summarize, but most of them, not all. Yeah, there's plenty of information available. Look for the sources. Don't trust anyone who is, the psychedelic guru or whatever, because there are people out there who unfortunately exploit the medicine and exploit people. So yeah, you need to be on the lookout for those people. Unfortunately, human nature is flawed.
Thank you so much. It was quite interesting talk, Vlad. So really insightful and a lot of information from your side.
Thank you. appreciate the conversation and the ability to talk about it, the topic that is dear to my heart.
Thank you so much. It was Mental Growth Network podcast. So if you feel this was an interesting podcast, please like it and subscribe to our channel. Share this with your friends. Maybe your friends therapists are thinking about it and you want, just help them a bit, boost up due to what we do here on our YouTube channel is free education for mental health and neuroscience professionals.
Spread the knowledge.
And it was me, Yi Meandr, for digital health expert for MGN.